the King of Kings.
Welcome to another episode of the King's Couch. I'm your host, Sulo King, and today I have a special guest via Zoom, Geoffrey Vincent. He's the co-creator of Darke Publishing. He's also the editor, writer. I met him at WonderCon last month, and he was at the booth that we had a mutual friend that was hosting us there. And I thought he'd be an interesting guest to have on, our show. So here he is, Geoffrey. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. I appreciate you having me. We had a great time, great conversation. So, it's amazing to, continue that dialogue we had before. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely, man. So tell me a little bit about how you got into comic books. Let's just go back to the beginning, like early childhood reference, or sorry, influence, and just like how that kind of got you to where you're at today.
I think most young men and women and kids typically, a lot of us enjoy comics and enjoy anything that really like awakens the imagination. So I wasn't very different in that sense. I was a big X-Man. I mean, I still love X-Men. A big X-Men fan. My father used to tell me, stories about, comics he would read, the older, Spider-Man. I mean, he lost a lot of them. He used to tell me all the time, like how much he wished he had kept them. The old Iron Man, he would draw the comics also himself. He is a like CAD designer, so he could draw back before they had, computers and they used blueprints. And he would tell me how comics, it was like a huge, influence for him. And it was the thing that kind of got him drawing, actually. And I can't draw at all.
Mm.
The dialogue with him, kind of stuck with me a lot. So, of course, as a kid, I loved comics. I loved Superman, of course. And I was right at that age where there was the death of Superman. So that was really popular with where it spun off to the four different, you know, post-death Superman, Superboy, Steel, et cetera, et cetera. And I was big into that.
I
And
saw my blacked out covers, like unopened. You know,
yep,
to that, yeah.
yep.
That was game changing for Superman.
It was great. It was a good, good collective of comics. Of course, X-Men, as I mentioned, and there was the beginning too, like in media. I think as a kid, and I think going back on it, of like the early sort of expansion of comics into media. Like Dick Tracy. I remember seeing the movie, and then all of a sudden, I like wanted to read all the Dick Tracy comics, and I have this one anthology. It's in my parents' house somewhere, I'm sure. And I would read it all the time. As old as the Dick Tracy comics are, I would read those as a kid. And of course, Archie, in the grocery store, grabbing those. So I just always really, liked, comics, always enjoyed them as a kid. And then as you get older, you, at least in my case, it's like, oh, that's for kids. And I kind of moved away from it, right?
Right.
And it's great to sort of revisit it, but that's a different, sort of conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, for me, I got into creative writing and storytelling. So that's what like led me to singing, for example. And you know, I knew trying to make it as a musician was going to be hard. So that's how I ended up on the business side of things. So I can, one, make sure that I don't get taken advantage of, and two, just to really understand and be in the industry regardless. Because you go from fascinating about something, like comic books, for example, and you say, hey, maybe I could make a career out of doing something like that. The last guest I had on the show, I haven't released his episode yet, but he was an artist. I don't know if you saw that Predator, like big uh, art piece, like airbrushed art piece that I carried over to the booth. So he owns his own company where he just, he makes prints like that, of all these awesome IPs out there, you know what I mean? Like in franchises. And I was really inspired by what he had to say, how it's never too late in life to really take a chance on yourself. He didn't really think that, hey, this was. I worked like 30 years as in the police force, and I didn't expect this to really take off, but I took the chance anyways. And he's, only been doing it for a short period of time, and he's become quite successful at it. In fact, he's getting, compliments from, he was telling me a story about how he did some Star Wars stuff, and he brought some over to Ewan McGregor at a convention, and how he complimented it, how, so I see a lot of, different fan art out there, but, this is really good. And that's what gravitated me towards him, because I work in that kind of talent scout, esque, mindset whenever I'm just going to conventions or just meeting people. I mean, that's how you and I like synergized and started talking, like the gift of networking is my superpower. If I was a comic book character or something, I'd be like Network Boy or whatever.
Network, well, big,
Well,
yes,
yeah,
super networking. Yeah, sure.
right. So it's cool to hear that your father helped influence you growing up. Now, was he doing art as a hobby, or was he working professionally in the industry? Tell me a
Well,
little more about that.
he wasn't. I'm from Detroit, so
Okay.
Detroit, everyone works in the car industry. Everyone. Well,
Okay.
not now, but back then, probably about 80% of everyone I knew, my friends, family, worked either in some form of manufacturing, just in general, whether it was the paper or some sort of manufacturing job, furniture, building furniture or working in a furniture factory, or cars. And now he didn't work in a factory. He was what you call a CAD designer, is still does it actually. He's what you call a CAD designer, where before the engineers put together the car, they have to look at, sort of prototype for it, make sure everything works. And again, before these fancy, computers we have now, you had to draw them by hand. You had to sort of blueprint them. And he would tell me what got him started on drawing, you know, as a living in design, though, ultimately in industrial design, which is cars, what automotive design was comics in the, understanding anatomy and all of that stuff, and how he would, draw vehicles from different comics, Batman, whatever he could get his hands on. Or an Iron Man suit, things like that. He would tell me he would draw as a kid and all the way through high school. So he was a pretty good, he could, draw pretty good blueprints once he learned, the rules of automotive design. So that conversation about like just comics and the value of them and the art of them stuck with me, So I've thought about it recently, to be honest. So that's a good question. I'm like, man, why do I always like comics? And that was something I recently realized. Oh, my father used to talk about them a lot when I was a kid. So yeah, that's something that stuck with me. And there was a huge like not fair. There was a mall in Michigan called Wonderland Mall, right? Me and my friends would go to this mall every summer uh, for the comic book fair. It was like what you call a comic book basketball card fair. We would go there and buy like comic books, basketball cards, exchange them.
Mm.
And it was like that was a big deal. We would spend the whole day there. We would go to a movie. We would go to the arcade. Things kids did back then. But that fair was huge. So things like that. I realized comics have always been sort of an integral part of my life, especially my early years, like my younger years when I was a kid. That and music, those two things.
Yeah, that's awesome. I grew up having a love of comic books. I had a local comic book store that was, walking distance from, when I leave middle school and everything. And I'd always stop in there, hang out there on the weekends and whatnot. And that, for me, like I really gravitated towards like Image, because that's when Image became a thing, when I was like 13, 14, back in the early to mid 90s. And I started, you know, getting more wind of Comic Con, and I would go there. And WonderCon reminded me actually of a reflection of what Comic Con used to be like here in San Diego back in
Mm.
those days. So it was so nice to be able to just wander around, not have to be surrounded by a million people everywhere. And I mean, Comic Con is a type of convention that can make even the most non, you know, um, you know, people that don't have any kind of why am I brain farting here?
Like social anxiety, like
Yeah,
any.
yeah, exactly. Anxiety or claustrophobia. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry, I just got back from Memphis last night, so
Oh yeah, how
a
did
little
that go? That
exhausted.
was pretty cool, right?
Yeah,
Memphis.
it was quite the experience, man. And we stayed in this historic land site. It was like an old rubber stamp company that had been transitioned, probably abandoned for years. And someone, took it over and turned it into an Airbnb. So it was a two-story loft. We had some roommates that were out there from Oklahoma City, but there was five of us staying there and only one bathroom. So whenever someone would walk around on these old wood floors, it would wake one of us up. So
Oh wow.
yeah. But
Okay.
it was worth it. I mean, it was, 5 minutes, 5 minute drive from the studio. So we wanted to stay relatively close and by Beale Street and downtown. But it was a lot of fun and getting to stand on the X or the X marks the spot on the floor, stand on that X where Elvis Presley got to track his vocals when he first started out there was quite
Wow.
an amazing feeling. It's one thing doing the tour and getting to stand on that X, which I did almost 10 years ago, but actually recording an Elvis cover and trying to summon him and that magic and history in that room was such a surreal feeling. And then Saturday night we did an original song. With the Elvis track, my bandmates they stepped out and thought it'd be cool if I hired, two local guys. So I hired a guitar player and a stand-up bass player. So it was definitely a trip just jumping in there working with musicians that I've never worked with before, in a professional setting like that. So it's a lot of fun, but so that's why I'm a little a little foggy today. But other than
It's
that, I'm
fun.
good, man. I'm still riding on that high. I love adventures like that. I mean, even going up to WonderCon was kind of like that for me, man. Going out solo and just for that was like a pure solo adventure and hanging out with Amy and Amon and meeting all you guys was just great. And now here you are today, and we're talking about our favorite things, subculture wise, pop culture. So let's get back to talking a little more about your childhood and where that kind of went from there. So you grew up, having a fascination for comic books. Uh, after high school, did you end up going to college? Like what kind of career path did you head down from there?
Yeah, it's interesting. So comics, early years, huge reader, kid writing, journal writing, stuff like that. Typical stuff, sports, watching sports primarily. I wasn't much of an athlete.
Mm,
And I really had a thing for music by like I think maybe third or fourth grade. I was ironically, I loved, contemporary music, but the school back then only offered like classical stuff, like marching band, the stuff you play in a school band.
right.
I really began to take to that stuff, to that music. And I began to play like symphonic drum, xylophone, keyboard a little bit. And I did that in middle school also. And I was pretty decent. I was decent enough that I went to a high school that was my thing at the high school. It was a performing arts high school called DSA, Detroit High School for the Fine and Performing Arts. And famous alumni Aaliyah, got to say that.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, so it was a good school. It was a great school. It was a great experience of being around young people who all were very talented and just like you're like at least in my case, I felt like the like seventh, 10th, 20th, 30th most talented person, in front of like behind like tons of other young people. And it was just very inspiring and I felt seen and heard and encouraged. So after that, I did theater there too, or this thing called speech and debate. So I fell in love with acting and then cinema. There was a program where we would make some commercials and some other stuff. So a huge part of my high school career was like music, acting, and toward the latter I started to dig into film a little bit and really enjoying that, and directed like a little commercial when I was senior in high school. That was fun. And I ended up going to college. I got a scholarship, but my scores were horrible. So I had to go to community college for a year. I can't remember if it was a year or two, and then transferred to Michigan. So that was fun going to college. And I got into still film. That was my major, screen studies, communication, PR, all that stuff. And I went from that to working with a friend of mine at this thing called a campus video, where we would like write a bunch of shorts. We had to provide content for the school, all while on our downtime making our own stuff. So that's when I really, really began to like enjoy cinema and that whole genre of, or that craft, the work of editing and writing, and the stuff. I don't think it was good when I look back at it. Like, man, this is not good. But the process is what I love so much, of just sitting down and doing it in the moment you capture in time. It's like a diary. You go back and look at it. It's really, you can't recreate it, right? It's right there. You can sort of travel in time with it. So I did that, and then I came out of school thinking like, all right, well, let's go. Recession. Then no one's working. So from there, I
It's
began.
about like 08, 09
Yeah,
time
yep. Like
period.
right
Yeah.
before. Fun fact: in Michigan, I came out of college around like 05, 06.
Mm.
Fun fact: it hit Michigan and some industrial states earlier, right?
Right.
Because it's a lot of automotive, factory jobs. So I remember like no one was working. It was rough, crazy time. So I was teaching. I started teaching, um, and I decided to move to Georgia and continue to do that there. And
What were you teaching?
I was teaching some writing.
Right.
I was a sub in Georgia, not in Georgia, in Michigan. And then I took on a job teaching English in Georgia. And but still, writing and not really knowing what I wanted to do, man. Young, early 20s, like I want to make stuff, but I don't know how to make stuff. I don't know what to do. Do you make a movie? Like, what do you do? Where I'm from, no one does this. So
Right.
Georgia seemed to be the best bet for me. And when I went there, an old friend of mine, well, my close friend at the time in Michigan, had a friend in Georgia, a friend of my friend Cass. We call him Caspian now. And I hadn't seen him in years, like probably since I was maybe 13 or 14. And we linked up, and it was like old times. We didn't know we're into a lot of the same stuff. And at the time, he was working on a few stories, like high fantasy stories. And I had a couple of like ideas and stories I worked on. Also, because I was big into writing too, in college, I was big into writing journalism and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's some stories I was working on. And he said, well, let's do something together. And I'm like, I thought you would never ask. So we started working on a short that ended up getting delayed. And then we wrote a feature, because when we went to get funding for the short, a friend of mine said, well, why don't you guys write a feature, because that would look better if somebody, is into it. And the feature, what's interesting is we got a lot of interesting like feedback from reputable like managers and stuff during that time. And that was what you call like a positive omen from the Alchemist. That's what, a omen, positive one, that told us, okay, we got to keep going, because there's people that at that time have been to school for a long time who were saying like, how did you get a meeting with blah, blah, blah manager? How did you even get them to read your script? So that told us like, man, this might be something, we might have something here. And one of the big notes we got was you should try to make something more visual. This isn't necessarily a movie.
Mm.
You might want to write a comic, or just try to make it small enough where you can get it made yourself. So we decided, you know what, with a bunch of other ideas, to try our hand at a couple of comics. And that's what we started with. We started writing a few. we got hired to work on this comic for Shifty Look,
Mm.
um, with the help of this guy named Edmund Shern. Edmund Shern's amazing. He worked at Radical Comics for a minute, and he's done a lot. He's done like everything. He's been around forever, and that's a guy Chris or Cass knew, and he said, "Okay, look, I'm going to hire you guys to write on this particular short-lived like series online." And we had a great time. That was our first like job where we got paid, and it was a real, it was
What was
job.
the series about?
It was interesting. It was a retelling of with Namco. They were taking some of their older IPs and doing comics of the older IPs on this website. And the
So
comic
the
was
online comic? Is
was an
that your
online
thing?
comic.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's totally online. And it was about a samurai. I can't remember the title, to be honest. For the comic, it was called Scar. They changed the name to Scar. And it was about a samurai who was like, for us, we wrote him as a
Mhm.
time traveler where he had to go back in time to rescue, his lost love, and he had to kill some people. It was just, we were big into Doctor Who at the time. So we had to, you know, throw that in there. He was, it was interesting. It was a fun story. And it was I think one of the better works at Shifty Look, to be honest. In that moment. So we got some positive feedback for that one. And from there we decided to, keep it going, keep pushing. And
That's
yeah, that was that.
right on, man. And then what did you do after? Well, like, where did life take you after that in your career?
So yeah, so it was interesting. So we were working on a couple of other comics with a bunch of concept artists. So we initially had this whole idea of like creating these comics with very, 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 very detailed art, because the art is what makes the comic. So we, at the time, I still believe this, that a lot of the cinema that we watch, um, some of the greatest artists, are working on that cinema, because it has to be concepted, it has to be created. That the director's the director, but he has to have an artist
Right.
behind everything.
Yeah.
We think of I don't want to get too deep, but you get what I'm saying, right? So we thought if you could get some of those concept artists to actually do comics, that would be, I think, a very, very unique, comic that could possibly be revolutionary to the art form. Little did we realize there's a reason why you don't want to have an artist doing art that detailed for a comic, because of time.
Mm.
So we came across that hurdle with creating a couple of different comics um, with high level concept artists.
Right.
Right. So we had a couple failures, a couple, what's the word? Obstacles you have to climb. And along the way, we met, Cass met Ash Jimenez, or AKA Banished Shadow.
Mm.
Um, and at the same time, Cash told we were coming up with a story. He pitched me an idea for a boxer.
Mm.
The story was called Shadow Boxer,
Mm.
and it was about a guy who fights his way through um, a world of like lycans and vampires. And at the time, we were watching a lot of Ippo, and we were talking about Berserker and just a bunch of other stuff. And he said, I really want to do this project, man. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. And he met Ash, aka Banished Shadow, and he went on to, pitch her the idea. And she went, no, I'd rather do my own, story. And she had all of these, characters for this website called Badassery Women.
Right.
And these were lycans, vampires, and it was its own like universe, but all women. And I mean, it just, the art looked phenomenal. And after he saw that, he said, well, look, let's see if we can merge her world to our story, or his story at the time, the story he had created. And, and then from there, me and you can work on fleshing it out, writing it, building on it. which is what we did. And thank God, Banished Shadow went for it. She said, "Oh, it's cool, let's do it." And she it was great. And she said her only request was the main character um sort of fit the world, fit the universe. So
Mhm.
Cash won, and he designed the character, Talon with Banished Shadow, the two of them together, and then one male character, Wraith, for the story.
Right.
Um, and from there, off to the races. And we've been working on that comic for a while now.
Nice. And refresh my memory here. You were promoting a comic when we were there.
Yeah.
Was that
That-
like episode one or I mean what am I saying episode? I mean issue one for the comic. Well,
yeah,
you have a Kickstarter we need to talk about as well. Going.
yeah, that's the comic. Talon Seed of Darkness is the comic that we were there promoting. We're on issue 3 now.
Okay.
This issue, they're pretty large issues. We usually do typical comic is 24 pages. Our issues tend to be at least 24, and you lean more on the side of 36 pages, 36 to 40 pages or more.
Mhm.
So we have the first 3 issues we're presenting in a paperback form with a lot of like behind the scenes material and stuff like that. So when you met me, I was there with issue 1 and 2, just to, build up momentum for the Kickstarter for issue 3, which is out now, which is
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, I wasn't sure if those were prototypes or you already had those published and were out for readily available to order online or pick up in a comic book store. Because I think you had mentioned, now that I'm thinking about it more, that you could get issues 1 and 2 at comic book stores. Is that correct?
you can get issue 1 at
Yeah.
stores through Scout. So we got a contract with Scout. We had a deal with them, publishing deal. So yes, so Scout's publishing issue 1. Issue 2 should be on the way. But we usually do our Kickstarter slightly ahead, just so we're not competing with the um the drop that takes place within the comic book store, because it's almost 2 different communities, right? Because the Kickstarter community is a community that Banish Shadow has worked really hard to develop, that I've worked really hard to develop, and Caspian has worked really hard to develop. So that's almost like a different world than the comic book community, right? Because the comic book community is, somebody might walk in a comic book store to want to get, the new Transformers, and they might see the art for Talon and go, wow, this is cool, and pick that up. So you get more of that, I think, in promoting at Comic Cons, things like that, than somebody online who really likes Spanish Shadow's art, and then they go over to the Kickstarter and they support the book and order from there. So we usually, like, as I mentioned, to make a long story short, we usually do an issue or 2 ahead of the drop in the
Gotcha.
comic, so we're not competing at all. You know,
And
so
when you're doing these Kickstarter campaigns, what exactly are you funding to get, a certain amount of the issues released, cover all the expenses?
cover all the expenses.
Um, and what kind of like amenities, do you offer to, each individual that do you have like different tier options?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Because I'm trying to understand like the updated comic book world. It's been a long time, man.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, we offer different tiers. Nothing too crazy. A lot of folks, they go on to the Kickstarter and they're like, okay, they may have just heard of Talon and they now, want to catch up on all 3 issues. So we offer those for them to get. Or if they've been following Banished for a long time, and myself and the art director, creative director Caspian, um, he has his own following too. So there's people that might, know about issue 1 and 2. They just want to get issue 3 or the paperback edition. So each tier, we can sort of add more goods, add more, material as the price for each tier goes up. The final tier is like an art piece that she does where you will be included in the issue. That one will take a little longer because we usually, again, go issue ahead. So this would be for issue 5. Your art piece would be in that one. And because we're working on issue 4 right now.
Right.
So that's what it works. So it gives
I
us
see.
enough time. It gives her enough time to, do the commission on top of all the other commissions that she has to do. Because
Right.
that's what she does full time is art. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, that's really it. So we got posters, we got art commissions if you want your own self likeness inside of the comic and an art piece of that. We have that. If you want the thick 1 through 3 paperback deluxe edition, we have that. We have a couple of art prints. We have some limited edition art prints that we're offering. So yeah, we got quite a few things, and we have, of course, surprise variant that we always do from a guest artist. So we're dropping that soon, in a week. So
Okay.
the last 2 weeks going to be releasing a variant cover for talent. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited. So it's a
Yeah,
good time.
I bet. And your last Kickstarter just ended, right?
For issue 2 or for a different IP?
Well, you were promoting a Kickstarter at WonderCon. Is that one that was
I was
about to
doing that's the
start,
one.
about to
Yeah.
drop, or end?
It started on the 16th.
Yeah,
It
that's what I
ends
thought.
on
Yeah.
the 15th. So when we were at WonderCon, I will my intention was to promote more like a pre-launch. It was like a pre-launch promotion.
Mhm.
So that's what, it hadn't come out yet. We hadn't dropped it yet. So the
Gotcha.
cards and all that stuff listed so we get people to sign up. So when it did drop on April 16th, people would, be aware and would follow and hopefully support. And we did pretty good. We got like 48% of our goal and I think the first 24 hours or something like that. So, well,
Well,
let me 25% in the first 48 hours.
and is it still active? Can people still, okay, perfect. We'll have to drop that link in the episode profile for this, and we'll talk a little more about that, at the end of this interview. Um, awesome. So every time you put out an issue, are you doing a Kickstarter campaign to help with the funding?
Yes, absolutely. It's a lot of
Okay.
work. So, artists, it's a lot of work. So I'd say that. And then, pays for the printing and all that stuff. And we have a large enough following now that, it's not a huge ask, because she has a lot of people that support her. So, and that have supported the book. And we're surprised because for us, we really like the work. We really were inspired by the story. And,
Mhm.
you make something and you just hope, like, man, maybe people like this. Even if it's good and you're like, sure, people will like it, you're always very gracious and like excited and inspired when people actually do like it and support. So we
Okay.
just
That's
continue to.
all. That's awesome. Tell me a little more about Banish Shadow. Am I saying her name right? Yeah. Tell me a little more about Banish Shadow and how you guys ended up linking up with her.
Nothing crazy. You should run. It should be
I'd
great.
love to, man. I want to learn. I mean, with a name like that,
I
yeah, me
don't want to,
already.
I don't want to see she's such an enigma and she's brilliant. So I don't, but to make a long story short, we were looking for artists, which is what we typically do, because I can't draw and my writing partner is great a creative director as he is, draws better than me, but he's, not professional level. I'm sure he'll admit that.
Right.
But he can most definitely direct artists. So and scout them. So we spent months scouting for an artist for this particular project. And sometimes you'll just see an artist whose work you enjoy, and you'll just go, okay, um, let's work together. And then you pull out, 3 or 4 stories. Which one do they think, you know, they might want to work on and co-create together?
Right.
And then they'll go for it. If they'll go for it. Sometimes they go, no, I'm not with it. And it was nice meeting you, and then they move on. So, which is fine. But thank God for us, Banished really, really took to, the pitch, and she was just a cool about it. And I think there was a synergy between her and Caspian creatively. So it worked.
Yeah, I'm just looking up some of her art right now. Wow, she's pretty well versed. I like the whole gothic feel that she has. You know, this whole dark realm in her world. And something I'm really into and always have been since I was a kid and I first saw like Lost Boys as vampires, that whole lore.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, oh, look at that. Talon just came up in the Google image search as well. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, going back to what you're talking about, your partner being, someone that's, able to direct better than actually draw and act as like a talent scout. That kind of reminds me of myself because, originally when I started studying recording arts, and I realized real quick, I was like, I don't like engineering. But
Oh,
when,
wow.
because we were teamed up in group projects, like me and one of my classmates had to do a project together, and so I picked the band and recorded the band, and I realized real quick, I was like, I don't fucking like doing this. Like I'd rather just work in it as a producer's role. And little did I know, that 10 years later, I'd own my own studio and I got to do that. Not as much as I really wanted to because I had a business to run and I started a second business after year one of having the studio. So I had a lot on my plate, but it was such a fun ride and I can totally like relate to how that feels when you don't really take to a certain craft. Like another thing for me was I dropped the guitar and I picked up a microphone and I never put that down.
Oh,
You just
wow.
gotta understand how to harness your strengths and weaknesses, and I like working collectively, so I really respect what you guys are doing as a group team effort, the DIY way. That's what I've always supported, and that's why it's a pleasure to have met you and have you on this show and help support your cause and what you're doing. I think you have a lot of talent, and besides just being talented, you're just a really down to earth, and humble person, and that speaks volumes. You know how this industry is.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed in that, but yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I mean, how many times have you met artists that you respect and you're like, wow, this guy's kind of a prick? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. It's I try to give grace. Like it's a hard journey being an artist. I don't consider myself. I'm more of a writer. You know, I think more project management, producer. I'm an artist in my own way, but I'm not an artist in the sense of I think some folks just really like they let it all bleed on the work and they really are putting themselves out there. And that can, from what my experience, like with artists, it can like harden you a bit if you're taken advantage of. So a lot of times people are taken advantage of. So even like, so it's very short patience for like, any kind of what's the word, inauthenticity or anything that they feel is just not necessary.
Yeah,
They
man.
have rules they live by sometimes, and that can come across as like being difficult. And sometimes it is, they're being difficult. But I think in general, it's just a rough job sometimes. So, I think that's sometimes how people end up being so hardened and like cold and kind of
With a
rude.
lot of industries, like when I started out in the music industry, I was running music venue, the first one at age 22, and I was either praised or ridiculed because of my age and inexperience. And it took a long time and a lot of you know obstacles, like you said earlier, to get through. I had to learn from my mistakes, falling flat in my face, making mistakes a few times, just not knowing any better. But I always listened and appreciated, the time that my mentors invested into me. In fact, this solo project that I just took out to Memphis is this whole solo project dedicated to my mentor who broke me into the music industry. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2012 of diabetes. Yeah, the young age of 49. But that it was interesting when I was out there too, because I was really like thinking a lot about him when I had moments to myself and just kind of reflecting on how first debut song we did, right before COVID was really
Mm,
uh about like his teachings and my reflection of, you know, being so much older and wiser and kind of just like looking back on everything that I've done in my career, you know. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. I gotta silence my ringtone. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Telemarketers are blowing me up over here. Um, but yeah, man, you know, like for me, it's just about, I'm sure you can understand, especially being a writer, going through those kind of blocks and working around them, you know, and just keeping yourself inspired, especially when, you know, life doesn't necessarily go your way when you're working on a project or trying to obtain that goal, like, you know, your Kickstarter goal, for example. Like, everyone's got their own method to madness, you know, what they do to try to keep their head up. Like, well, what if you had to, especially like give some kind of advice to somebody else asking that kind of question? Like, what do you do, you know, to kind of keep yourself motivated and keep going? Because I've seen a lot of people in different industries just throw in the towel, you know, just completely do a 180, be like, you know, I'm just going to go get a real 9 to 5 job. You know, I'm just not cut out for this life. I've seen people in the music industry complete, even that have worked for me, just like, I don't know how you do it. You're like a tank. You just keep going and you don't let anything stop you when you're set your mind to something.
Man, so you're asking what do I do to keep
What,
going?
yeah, what do you do when you get in these funks? You know, like that every artist experiences.
I'm you. Any of my friends could probably testify to this. I usually just whatever I'm feeling, just go with it. Don't shame yourself for it. If like that's my thing. Like if I feel like I want to give up, sit in that feeling and be cool. Like don't judge it and don't feel bad if you're like, you know what, man, I just want to get a regular job. Sometimes just saying it and helps you go, no, no, I don't. What am I talking about? Just sitting in it and really feeling it, really considering it. What would that look like? For me, that helps. And once I sit in it and I'll go, okay, you know what? Nah, this wouldn't even be worth it. Getting, not going on. I mean, I have a job, but yeah, most comic writers have editor jobs that they do while they are teaching or whatever, while they do comics. But that's time. You can be dedicating more time to something else instead of comics or doing crowdfunding or whatever your dream is.
Mm.
So for me, whenever I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm thinking about like whatever with this, I'll sit in that feeling for a moment and just like really consider, is this something I really want to let go of and move on from? And a lot of times when I sit in that feeling, the answer is no. Or sometimes it's good to just take a break and do something else. Not like a long break, but just like regularly make time for yourself, live my life, and not just work. For me, I can't just work, 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 work. I have to have a life that I'm living. I have to like go out and see people and see my friends and, go to dinner, even if it's a place I like alone or whatever, just living the life and not, as one writer I heard say, live at your desk. That's not fun either. That to me, that doesn't sound very exciting.
No,
Uh,
I see
so
people doing that, you know, and just like living the hermit life. I can't do that. You know, as a extrovert like myself, I just I can't. I can't understand, you know, or let me rephrase that. It's more hard for me, or sorry, it's harder for me to understand and relate to someone that's completely introverted and would rather just live at their desk or stay in their room all day and create and paint or write. Or, you know, some people in this day and age, especially, you know, the zillennials, they'll sit there and just play video games all freaking day long and spend time on TikTok or whatever, you know, just I went through that with my last relationship, you know, because her daughter, you know, was a teenager when she moved in. Now she's like 22, still kind of stuck in that funk. And I see some of my other buddies' kids that are like that. I'm just like, dude, don't you ever crack down a little more? I was like, you can try all you want, but you know, like you can only do so much. You know, I'm not a parent, so I can't really relate to that. You know, like sometimes I wonder if I was like,
yeah,
how. how would I address that situation? I feel like technology has advanced to the point from our generation to now where it's just like there's pros and cons to it completely. People are so reliant and glued to their devices, and you have stuff like cyberbullying, that's forcing kids to like even commit suicide because of that. It's
Yeah.
just like you can't go anywhere, say anything, or do anything without someone threatening to point a phone at you. Or like in the case of like, how many times have you witnessed, people whipping out their phones rather than springing into action to help someone in an accident or break up a fight, for example. It's a crazy time we're living in.
Yeah, it's different. It's the technological advances, I think, it's unprecedented. It's like I think the last time one could argue was maybe the turn of the 20th century or something crazy like that, or even the turn of the 19th century, from 18th to 19th century. It's yes, it's different. This is the most change we've seen in a long time. I think I'm not like an old guy, and it's crazy when I think of just when I was in my early 20s, how like different life was. Right?
Right.
It wasn't that long ago. That wasn't hundreds of years ago. But
Mm.
there's things around now that simply didn't exist when I was 21 at all, or when I was, 20.
How old are you again?
I'm 40.
40. Okay. Yeah. So you're not too far behind me. I'm 44.
So it was just a whole different world, man. It was totally different world, completely different.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, look, I don't know if you remember, if you were old enough, like in the 80s, I was like the one cool kid on the block because I got a Nintendo, and everyone would kind of hang out at my house like it was a arcade because of
yeah.
that fact. Now it doesn't even, it's no big deal if someone has a video gaming system.
I mean, they'll play the game system in the middle of anywhere, like in the
Right.
middle of like a classroom. Kids will like whip out a game system. So a game system now is they'll play on their phone. You can play really great mobile games you will play on Nintendo. You can play
Right.
Contra on your phone now. Just take out
I
Contra.
got the emulators play Mike Tyson's Punch Out on my phone. You
You
know
can
what I
play
mean?
Mike Tyson Punch Out on your phone today. Like that's not even a stretch. So I mean, the good thing is that video games are, I think because of such stressful times, have become a de-stressor for a lot of people,
Yeah, I
which
agree.
is good. I think that's making it sort of a new industry in a way where people can, escape in a way that's not harmful to, themselves or others. Think maybe before games, it was kids smoked cigarettes. I mean, who knows, right? So it is an addiction, video games, those things can be an addiction, but sometimes it's just people need to decompress, it's
Right. Well, I mean, they're trying to make it somewhat interactive with the VR, and
yeah,
I thought it
yeah.
was pretty cool, concept when we first came out. Everyone was all about that bowling game, and
Oh yeah,
I got
yeah.
so excited playing it the first time at my buddy's house. 'Cause he, I had never played it, and he had a big screen, so I felt like I was at a bowling alley. And he's like, "Dude, you better be careful. You're gonna like huck my remote with my TV." So that's why they have a hand strap, Sulo. I was like, "Oh
I'm,
yeah,
I'm
I
I'm gonna
gotta
take
put
you
that on."
back. I'm gonna take you back to the what was it? The pad, the Nintendo pad, or you
Oh
like,
my god, I totally forgot about that. Wow.
yo, that was crazy.
That
Like
didn't take off like the Power Glove did.
the Power Glove. They had a VR set for a minute, Nintendo. It was the goofiest thing ever because when you looked at it, it just looked like a Game Boy. It was like green and it's really goofy. But they've tried. I mean, it's come a long way, man. Like
It's
it's crazy.
competitive. I mean, it's between Microsoft with Xbox, Nintendo, and then you have PlayStation, Sony. So it's just those are like the three top tier, companies that are really left. What was really interesting is I had a patient that came through my work. He doesn't come there anymore. In fact, I don't even know if he's still alive at this point because a lot of our demographic is old. But he was a designer that helped formulate the very first Atari. So Yeah, yeah, and he would tell me stories about how he designed, like, some electronic piece, that was, like, very innovative at the time, in formulating the first gaming system. So that was pretty cool, to, hear, going from an engineer and getting approached with this idea, and he was just like, I thought it was kind of a silly but cool idea when I was pitched on this at first.
The
But
great thing about creating anything is like there's so many people involved, man. Like it's crazy. I was watching Air recently, the movie Air about the first pair of Jordans created, and just how pivotal the designer of the actual shoe. I mean, I don't think anyone knows the name. I watched the movie and I can't remember his name. Some shoe buff, I'm sure does, but he was such a pivotal role in, helping name it, helping design the shape, helping design the silhouette of the shoe and where the swoosh would go, the fact that they were going to use a lot of red on the shoe, which I guess back then was against the NBA's rules. You couldn't, you would get fined if you had so much red on the shoe or any color outside of white. So just pushing the envelope in that sense of like, I think they budgeted for the fine according to the movie. And I read that that's actually what they did because it would be advertisement for the shoe. But a lot of that was what were people behind the scenes, man, who, there's this thing that people walk around wearing everywhere now. I mean, I'm in LA, so people wear Jordans from Beverly Hills to South Los Angeles to the East. I mean, it's everywhere at this point. But it's the people behind the scenes who help bring it to life, and then most people are always kind of forgotten. So it's really dope to hear a story about somebody who actually designed a key piece to an Atari game.
yeah, it's cool. You read about something, or you watch a interview on YouTube, but then actually not just meeting someone. I mean, you're sitting there treating them. I work as a neurotherapist, part of my job, so I'm giving him a neurofeedback session, and he's so fascinated by it, and he's breaking down like how the actual technology works even better than I can understand it. He's been an engineer his entire life. He was in his early 80s at that point. And I see a lot of patients come and go. One of the you know things I've always admired about people, uh, from a historical, sense and standpoint, like what you were just talking about, is these people think completely outside of the box, and they're shunned a lot of the time, or told you can't do that, or that doesn't make any sense, or that's stupid. And I kind of, I've always looked at it like this: like stupid is smart. Like every historical, innovative pioneer in any industry for anything that's ever been designed has always been deemed crazy at first and misunderstood. And then look at them now. A lot of them were mad, like Howard Hughes. I mean, that guy was just he was definitely out there, for example. But
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's just inspirational, like reading those stories. But to actually hear someone break it down, and in the flesh like that is just it's pretty cool, man. I must say, you know. But hey, let's go back to your story. Where you're at. You're about to put out. You're in the process of putting out issue 3 for your
Yes.
Kickstarting campaign. What's next for you, like after this? Like what is this like the only project you have in the works, in the fire right now, the
Mm,
docket, or do you have more
we got a few
coming
more
up?
projects. We got a few more projects that we're working on shipping. That we've done crowdfunding for, that we're getting things together to ship. The first will be Behind Talent, Crimson Tower by artist named Ben Tobit. He's brilliant. He also has a very cool game coming out
Oh,
uh,
cool.
through Free League Publishing. You can check it out.
It's a game.
Yeah, it's not a video game, but I think it's an RPG like role game.
Oh,
Um,
okay, like a board game.
yeah, But you know, the long it's just like the book. It's like a role
Oh,
playing.
gotcha.
You just get the book. I don't think you get like a full board game with it. I'm not sure.
I see. Okay.
It looks really amazing. So he's doing that, but he's also done a comic with us called Crimson Tower. I did not write on this one.
Mm,
I am simply the project manager and the guy who pushes things forward. But it's written by Caspian Dark and um, art by Ben Toppett, and you know it's amazing story. It's a fantasy story, a high fantasy story about a man named Graven who finds out that his wife, who he assumed was murdered, actually is out in the world. And there's a key, he's given a key mystery or, you know, key clue to solving that mystery. And he has to go out and find her, the family that, you know, he lost. So imagine like a taken revenge tale, but in a like Game of Thrones world, but with like Bloodborne or Witcher, you know, sort of
right.
dark fantasy, you know, characters. So it's that kind of story.
I can dig that. That's cool.
It's
Right
really
on.
cool, really cool story. So I think it's great. Crimson Tower, the name of it. So that one is the first issue's done. The campaign's over. It's been over for a minute, and we're now prepping to ship. We're revving up to ship that one. So
Cool. Besides doing this, comic book or publishing company, so you're a project manager for other things as well. Is that separate from the publishing
oh no,
company?
no, no. This is mostly all the publishing stuff I'm working on now.
I see. Okay, gotcha. And you mentioned earlier, are you working a 9 to 5 job on top of this?
Oh yes,
Yeah,
I'm hustler. I'm in LA, so you have to have 9 different jobs. You have
yeah,
to
yeah. I can imagine.
freelance editing. You have to teach. You have to, you know, I consult as an instructional coach for schools, helping teachers keep higher, you know, senior, junior students more engaged in their English courses.
Okay,
I do freelance writing, you know, I have like 1,000 different things I'm doing. So
right. It's all about time management.
acting, I've thought about acting. I've taken classes, so I'm thinking about getting into acting. So
There
I
you
can
go.
make that ironically, people are like, you want to make that your job? I mean, it's LA, you know, that isn't a crazy job to have in Los
But
Angeles.
you do
So
have a background in theater, you know.
I do. So it's fun, it's expressive too. Think for anything else, it's just a way to also like explore yourself creatively, you know, in a different form that's separate than anything else I'm working on right now. So,
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I'm working on writing, self memoir, self help book.
oh, there you go.
Yeah,
See?
I don't know if I had mentioned that. It's called a dating guide for musicians. The struggle is real.
Oh, wow.
Because I've told so many stories about the music industry, and everyone's like, "Why are you single? Why are you single?" And I'll tell stories of like this relationship or this situation. And my buddy inspired the book back in 2016 when I broke up with a girl that was 10 years younger than me. And he's like, you know, I'm way more entertained than the book I just read by this guy that, it was a best-selling book, but he got popped for fabricating 80% of his stories. Like, I would much rather read you if you had your own book, because I know that all these stories are real. And I was like, well, there's nothing to really embellish. I was like, these are situations that happen. One thing about me, and I'm sure you can relate to as an artist, is you don't want someone coming in there nitpicking every little thing and telling you you're trying to live out some, childhood dream that could have, should have, would have been. I always encourage people to keep shooting for the stars and keep turning those daydreams into a reality, and not stopping. You may not be good at this thing, but it doesn't mean you can't go do that thing. And if you don't, try to pursue your interests, you're not gonna, find something that hits or lands or that totally resonates with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I love about like our little motley crew that we had at WonderCon. Everybody had their own kind of thing going for themselves, but it was just a happy equal medium of our little group. We have quite the multicultural group too, on top of things.
Yeah, it was a nice group. Yeah, I had a good time. It's fun. Had a fun time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, relationships are tough. Um, if you're in the creative industry and I think it's just tough in general. Relationships are tough in general, and added is if you're trying to do something creative. Then on top of that, if you're not quite at a place where you want to be,
Mm.
then it creates a sort of a dissonance between the couple, unless that person really like understands, the value in who you are and what you're doing, and if that's not there, if that's not like super apparent, that person then has to have faith in you.
Right.
So it's tough. That's a tall ask for anyone, if you're in a relationship. If I'm in a relationship with someone and she has a dream, and let's say I didn't find much value in it and I'm having to wait, and I'm making sacrifices and all these things, I can imagine why that would be tough. Um, I'm a dreamer too, so I get it. But I'm imagining if I wasn't that kind of person, I can imagine that would be tough. Like, which is why I think a lot of relationships like that end up, not lasting very long. So
Yeah, that's exactly what happened in that relationship I was referencing. How the book idea was born. And then I shelved it because I got in a relationship the following year. And then that just became that next relationship, another chapter in the book. You know.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't have any kids, never been married. I'm kind of like a unicorn in the dating world that I've been told a few times. What about you? You got any kids?
Oh no.
Oh,
Oh
no.
no. No, sir.
Yeah.
No, sir. Not a kid. I got you know, I have siblings, they have children, so they've had children for us. So it's all good, for the family.
Right.
So I try
Yeah.
to support, help, especially my sister, try to help her out, if things are, an issue, try to call, just call anyway. It's family. But it's like you see that's a battle. Having a kid is a responsibility. And I admire, man, like people who do it or who just push through. Sometimes, people have children, they didn't plan on having children and they, push through and they do their best with their kids. So I've always tried to really like plan, so if I have one, I'm as ready as I can be, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Like for the kid, for having a child. So no, I don't have any children.
Right. I hear you. You in a
Long story.
relationship at least or anything?
So what?
You in a relationship or anything like
No,
that? Yeah.
not right now. Not right
Yeah.
now. I've been
I
in
feel
some.
you, dude.
So what?
I feel you, man.
No, it's just I haven't. It's not that intentional, to be honest. It's more just waiting for the right person. I think as you get older, you kind of know, who you are and you know what you need and if the relationship will be like a hindrance for that person, you know, and what will be a hindrance for you. So you meet people and you go, like, okay, well, this would be a good fit. And you go, okay, damn, maybe it's not. Or you can see very early as you get older too, like you see sooner if it won't be.
Mhm.
So you find yourself just not ending up in a lot of relationships, which is kind of the downside of like not marrying early. Because then, like I waited for a long time then when it was okay, I'm old enough to let's get out here and start like really seriously start trying to date. You get into a place where you're like, oh, like where's it gonna go? Like, and so now it's ultimately I'm just, you waiting for the right person and in the meantime, making sure that you're healed and everybody carries problems, make sure you're healed and ready to go, for that person versus like becoming a burden for that person, just because you wanted to be in a relationship because society says you should be in a relationship.
Oh yeah. I
You know,
mean, I've encountered, situations where they wanted me to change and, everything I was saying, like, I've even been in toxic relationships where I'm just like, wow, I'm such a nice, easygoing guy. I've sacrificed so much. Like, I can't take this shit anymore. Like, well, why am I dealing with this? My last relationship ended because she was like, I need to cut you loose. Like, I need to do a lot of self work on myself. at the same time. I don't even really know what I want. I got to find my own happiness, and I can't drag you down into my own dark world when you have a whole life to live for yourself and you don't have any kids to worry about like I do, and stuff haunting you from the past, like previous relationships. So
Haunting her from the past. That's
yeah, yeah. I mean, but she, the fact that she communicated is why she's still in my life. You know what I mean? And became such an important person in my life. And we really had to show some maturity because we worked together too.
oh wow.
And a lot of people saw that. I mean, we had our moments here, and we have our spats every once in a while.
Hmm.
Like grown folks do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you have a few of those sometime.
But it's just all about, for me, it's been almost 3 years, and I've just gotten to a point where, I'm all right being by myself. Like lately, I love being a health and wellness coach, but I'm searching to have my own entity again besides music. I want that next challenge. Like I miss having an actual business that I can show up to that's mine. Like when I had my recording studio. So
I mean, when you show me those clips, I'm not gonna lie, it looked pretty fun. I'm like, man, that looks fun to like go to the studio every day, have a band there, working on music. It looked, I'm not gonna lie, it looked pretty exciting, to be
yeah,
honest.
I mean, if there was a bar up the street, I don't know how many times I tied one on and you know said I'm just gonna sit down at my desk before and sober up a little bit before I drive home because it was like a 2 block walk, and I'd wake up 6 in the morning, my feet's propped up on my desk, and I'm like, oh, it's morning time. And, like classic moments like that, and I just kind of look back at it and laugh. And we're having late night mixing or recording sessions, like everything I talked about in that short little closing video I showed you. You know what I mean? And I'm glad
Really?
I have certain memories like that, and that I created something like that. That's still recognized. Like tomorrow night is the San Diego Music Awards, uh,
Oh,
which is a really cool venue called Humphreys by the Bay, which is like right next to the bay, outdoor venue. um, I go out every year, regardless if I have something going on or not, to support. I've even had my band nominated 3 times. We took home one award one year for Best Indie Alternative Band of the Year back in 2018, which was really cool. But for me, it's just we've come to a point in this digital age where staying relevant, is about posting content, and not just about going out and showing your face out in public like it used to be, and supporting this cause that way. Uh, I don't want to be an influencer. I'm actually turned off by a lot of that lifestyle. It's a lot of content creation, and people are making a living just doing that. But that goes back to like that whole introverted, let's lock myself in my room, hermit life
yeah,
problem. You know
yeah.
what I mean? That's not who I am. I got to be out, or I start feeling depressed if I can't socialize with
Yes, yes.
humans.
So quarantine for you was probably rough, right? I'm assuming.
It was very rough. Yeah, I battled some depression. It was the first time I had lost everything. I knew my relationship was going south. So I started hitting up my friends after a while, and started a hiking group. And
Oh,
I had a circle of friends that I rotate through, that I would go hike with. I don't have too many single friends left, so it can be a little challenging. Sometimes they'd have to bring the kiddos along too, but
getting to that age,
work.
man. Yeah, everybody's got.
But I had to
Yeah.
do something. You're depressed when you're watching all 13 seasons of Cheers. You got nothing better to do.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it got to the point where I couldn't even like write. Like I was starting to lose like motivation for a while. And then finally, just something inside me said, you know what? You need to get your ass off this couch and you start living again. And I
Mm,
did.
mm.
I mean, we're only human, and we all go through our periods and our funks. And regardless, I don't like to keep my emotions necessarily just to myself. So I have my support system between my father and my mother. You know, sometimes my sister's in Mississippi, and you know, she
Okay.
has her own stress of being a college professor. So, but then, you know, friends are everything too. You know, when you have a good friend that you can just turn to and trust, you know, and a real friend will hear you out, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
I agree.
A lot of people don't want to, you know, have that burden to someone else's problems. Well, you know, when they can't even have the time to deal with their own. You know?
Yeah. It was rough. It was I just now looking back, like, man, that was really crazy. I mean, I would have never guessed something like that in my lifetime would happen. And I look back at photos from that moment. I had a close friend of mine. He's a photographer, artist, creator, all that fun stuff. And he would just hang out. We would hang out, and he would just take photos. He would just come over, boom, and let's go hit the streets. We would run out, because that's really all you could do is be outside
Mm.
and take a couple photos. And I saw some of me, and yeah, I'm like, man, I think I was depressed too. My beard, I mean, looked like crazy. I looked like a Unabomber. It was horrible. I'm like, what was I thinking? What was I doing? And, it was a rough time, man. I think for everybody, it was really, really, for me, what's unfortunate is, we came out of that, and it's like, you know, Squid Games, like, hey, let's keep the show going. Like, wait a minute, we're not gonna change. We're not changed by this at all. We're not reevaluating things. We're not reevaluating our work life. We're not reevaluating what kind of, how long our children are in school. We're not reevaluating the loans we're placing on people in college. We're not reevaluating our healthcare system. We're not reevaluating anything after going through that. So
Right.
that to me is as a society. So to me, that's more sad than, almost more sad than the event, because the event, was sad, but you were hoping like, okay, when we come out of this is going to be, or if we come out of it, because we didn't know, like, we'll be better off, as a people. And it's like not looking like that, so that to me is the thing that's like, damn, it's kind of sad.
It intensified a lot of people that are already angry people. You know what I mean?
Yes,
A
yes,
lot of problems.
yes.
It spawned off so many problems. You know, I mean, you had the whole BLM movement. You had people, you know, anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers. You know, Trump didn't help anything. You know, I mean,
No.
it brought out a lot of people that would normally not open up their mouths and say something. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of people, you know, that are just like boiling teapots, just waiting to explode, and that's what happened during COVID.
I
And
feel
I thought I agree with you too. I thought we would really take away and be more thankful, you know, at a second chance at life, because
right.
there were so many people were just starting to die. At first, people were laughing at it, like, "Oh, do you actually know anyone that's had COVID?" You know, a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's just a flu or something like that." And I was like, "No." I was like, I I know one girl like early on, 37, you know, no real health problems anyone knew about. She died in 3 days after getting it. You know, it's such a mysterious thing, you know, but there were so many different conspiracy theories that I had to deal with in my, you know, circle of friends around me. And then working, e- entering a new career in healthcare was definitely uh learning you know, whole journey. It's a
Yeah.
crazy time, man, you know, but reflecting back on it right now, I'm just glad that it's becoming, you know, more farther and farther in our rear view mirror, than a situation that you know, is just gonna end up like the dystopian, you know, post-apocalyptic fantasy stuff
Yeah.
that
I mean,
we're entertained by. You know what I mean?
I don't know what Diego is like, but the other day I went downtown for dinner, and downtown LA, and man, it looks rough.
You know
It
about the
looks
homeless situation?
looks just it's not even just that. I don't want to put that on those unhoused folks. I don't want to put it all on them.
Right.
Just the environment in itself looks it looks it's scary stuff, man. Like it's
Francisco,
food
Oakland,
everywhere. Yeah, I
LA's
mean, it
bad.
looks like worse. It looks, have you ever seen, there's a movie I just saw recently. It's called Beau is Afraid.
No, I haven't seen that.
It's like documentary. If you watch Boys Afraid, that's how LA looks, literally in parts. Like where am I? This is Children of Men, and Children of Men is one of my favorite movies of all time. Another
Yeah.
movie. I don't want to live in Children of Men though. It's almost now that movie looks prophetic in a lot of ways, and the writers it seems prophetic because I'm looking around like this looks very familiar.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So it is in our rear view, but we're
I mean, the
living
homeless
with.
situation intensified, and those poor people I mean, the numbers intensified, and people are dropping out of certain cities because it's getting so bad, and the city
Bad.
officials aren't doing anything.
It's
Our
bad.
mayors and the governor, it's just we're stuck in this crisis. It's pretty bad down here still, but comparatively to like LA or San Francisco or, even like that. Someone posted a video that I saw. It was a reshare of someone driving through the streets of Oakland, and it was sad to see, man. So much trash everywhere. It was like driving down the
Yeah,
street in New
yeah.
York, looking at people's curbside trash, but these people are living in the trash, like was it Fraggle Rock? The trash heap person. That's what it looked like. And these makeshift shanties and houses looked like a third world country bad. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Just when we think we have it bad out here, we got to remember, like, we could be dodging bullets and bombs and living in basically next to nothing. You know what I mean? A
It's
lot of people haven't traveled to the third world countries
the only
and
thing we're missing are the bombs.
yeah,
At this point, that's the bullets. Yeah, we got those. We
yeah,
still bullets. Yeah, the shanties. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Only thing we're missing is the bombs. You're like, thank God we're not getting bombed, but everything else is happening.
right,
The violence, the shanties. I mean, it's getting crazy, man.
yeah, yeah. I mean, just I tried to go out to Beale Street on Saturday night at Memphis, and we turned around and we're like, "Wow, this is insane." It was just like it reminded me of like you ever seen Escape from LA?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
like when he first gets out there, and
yes.
he's walking around and goes into a club or whatever. It was crazy. People are just driving around frivolously. There's cops everywhere. We're seeing all these like I'm getting all these updates and reports on my phone of all this violence everywhere. It's just like wow. I was like, it seems so peaceful during the day, but then at night, just everything just changes. It's like a whole nother world out there.
Yeah, you have.
Definitely like a culture shock coming from, calm city like San Diego out
Yes.
there. But I'm kind of like a chameleon type. I kind of adapt myself into whatever situation I'm put in. And I got the gift of gab, I'm pretty good at making friends with people quick, and showing that, you know, just general unity. Hey, you know what? I got nothing against you, man. You don't have to, treat me that way, or whatever. I didn't run into any problems when I was out there, but I could just see how crazy some of these folks were out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
What kind of what did you see? Like what kind of people? Was it like political folks or is it just like just
more like more like country. I'm in the South, man. Like we
oh,
came across so many nice people, but when we went to Beale Street, I definitely felt like a minority out there.
yeah, okay. Oh,
I didn't
that's
really see any tourists. And I was like, well, they were charging a $5 cover just to hang out in that whole, area. On both sides, everything was cornered off. There was cops everywhere. I mean, even when we went there on Thursday night, it was a little more mellow. There was cops around there still, and I heard that the crime and the violence had intensified. My sister kept warning me about that. Be very careful. I wouldn't recommend going out to Beale Street. But after we finished our recording session Saturday night, we all wanted to go back to the Blue City Cafe to watch some blues bands, and they have a great little cafe that's attached to the venue. So we were just trying to go there to get a bite to eat, and we didn't even want to deal with the line. There was a huge line trying to get in, and it was quite the sight to see, though. You
Mm,
know, I was a little bit entertained, but I mean, you definitely had to be aware of your surroundings for sure. You know what I mean?
yeah.
There's questionable, shifty people walking around.
Yeah, I feel like every major city now is like it's, going through it. To be honest, every major city's going through it, for varying reasons. And even California is, its own bubble. I'm
Yeah.
learning, you know. LA is its own bubble. San
When you're
Diego.
closer to the coast, it is definitely. You go more inland and you get more of that kind of feeling. Depending on where you go. But I love traveling and I love just trying to you know indulge in all like the different subcultures of the whatever area, city, country, and that I'm in. You know what I mean? And just trying to understand and meet locals and see what it's like to live out there. Like when we were in the studio, I was asking about like I keep hearing all this stuff on the news, but I don't always believe what I see about and hear about. The studio assistant studio manager, um, an engineer, she, I was asking her, I was like, do you ever feel like you need to have a male to accompany you when you lock up? Like, have you had any situations? She's, I've been living out here, like a long time and I haven't had one problem, but
Hmm,
I will say this, you always got to be aware of your surroundings. You never
yeah,
know. You know what
yeah.
I mean? So
Just because, there's conflicts and things, you don't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's not that anyone's targeting you.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, we definitely ran into some some characters when we were out there. And we got some of them on film, which was interesting. One guy came up to us when we were in the parking lot behind our Airbnb. I was just about to start filming, and uh, my cinematographer hit record. This guy pops out of nowhere, and he's all, "You guys making a video?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's all, "Can I be in your video?" And he walks up, and it's this old, older, like he was a Navy vet, and
Oh,
he's like, "What are you guys doing?" We told him, "Oh, we're out here making a documentary called Road to Sun," because we're me and my bandmates are recording some music at Sun Studios, and he starts reciting poems, and he
oh,
was so talented and witty, and we got all of it on like video. I mean, that's what I love about my cinematographer Craig is he's just so down for whatever, and of course we were polite and asked him. I was like, "Do you want to be on video? Is it cool? We don't just frivolously point and shoot and just like some of these younger influencers or
yeah,
YouTubers
yeah.
nowadays."
They want
You
the viral moment. The more angry the person gets, the more,
My buddy's son, for example, was showing me like these pranking videos that they do the homeless people, like this one guy, and I was like, I don't like this. I don't want to see this shit. Like,
Mm,
when I had my studio, we were in an alley, and then the ones that were sane enough for me to talk to that I didn't have to like fend off from my parking lot, because a lot of them try to use that as a bathroom. I would try to help out in whatever which way I could. I mean,
mm,
that's what way I was raised. My mom's an immigrant, so I was always raised to have compassion and try to pay it forward with whatever I can. And just have that sense of like, you know what, we're all equal in my eyes. You know what I mean? There's good people, there's bad people, and just treat others how you want to be treated.
yeah.
And
I
then,
mean, if everyone, that seems so easy, right?
mhm,
And it is. And I wish more people felt like that and thought that way, because it's so easy to not think that way. I know as crazy as that sounds, that seems overly simplistic, but it's the simple thing of treating people like they want to be treated, considering their thoughts, you know, a lot
yeah,
of people, it's crazy. We live in a society now, is I think we really are as a community, larger community, struggle with that in America specifically. So, but yeah, man. So I'm glad you're not like that. I try not to be like that. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I try to surround myself around good people. I'm naturally attracted to people with talent, and I even helped bring out and motivate people that have not even realized what their hidden talents are necessarily, like both in the studio or just out in the mix. Even at WonderCon, like meeting the Filipino Elvis. I had him on the show too already, and he started like, messaging me on Instagram. Is like, now that I feel so, Sulo, I really feel comfortable. And he's like, do you mind if I confide some life issues I'm facing right now? And you said you're a life coach. I was like, well, I did say that. I was like, yeah, of course. And, it meant a lot that this kid, like, took whatever advice. I don't know much about him. I've only met him once in person, and then, on the show for whatever, 90 minutes, whatever it was. But to leave that kind of impression where he can just feel comfortable enough, to have someone to talk to. And it sounds like he doesn't have a whole lot of people he can really confide things to, you know. Me, on the other hand, there's a ton of people I have in my corner, and I'm blessed, and that's how I feel. When I'm growing up, it wasn't always that way. I was picked on because of my name, and my parents, were constantly fighting. My father was an alcoholic, so that's how I got into writing in the first part, and going into my own little world. You know what I mean? And now, you know, looking at how my life has changed so much, like sometimes I almost feel like that little kid when I have my moments where everybody just kind of gets. We're only human. We have that moment, or we feel a little down about ourselves. Life gets you down, or whatever. For me, I just start soul searching. I start writing music. I listen to music. I call up a friend. I was like, man, I just really need someone to talk to right now. This is what's going on, and rather than just keeping it to myself and struggling internally, if I can't figure it out, like it's always good to get an outside perspective. So I feel like that's kind of what this kid took away. You know what I mean? And I'm happy that I was able to help somebody else. And that's the beauty part about what we do as artists, is we're entertaining others. But um, I don't know if you ever had a situation where someone's come up and be like, "Hey, man, I really related to that character that you wrote about, or that song that you're talking about. Like, it really resonated with me." And that's what I try to capture, and especially with writing this book. I'm not writing this book as a reflection on just my life. I really want people to have that kind of takeaway. I mean,
Mm.
hey, like I can relate to what he's talking about, and hopefully it helps others. Who knows? You know?
I hope so. I hope so, man. That's all we can do is do it and, create something and with the hope that, you know, either we're cleansed from it or someone else is. Sometimes you get both.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's the goal. Like, as long as it's not harmful. That's something. And sometimes you get into art too, where it's like art's a powerful thing, man. It can really move. I think it can move the world. And the film that just came out, Civil War, um, Alex Garland. I like Alex Garland.
Yeah,
And some people like great movie, very timely. Some people are going, this is horrible to drop this right before a pivotal, you know, election.
right. Yeah,
Sort of unprecedented times. You dropping a movie about Civil War. So, and no matter what side you're on, it's like the thing is, it's important, and art can, put something out in the zeitgeist that could garner a response from people.
right.
So yeah, man, it's a powerful thing. Art, I think it can be powerful, can be helpful, harmful, uplifting, enlightening, freeing, life saving.
Right.
So you're absolutely right, bro.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it's affected your life, right? Just
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's funny, like, right, when you think about your actual life and like if something happened where you couldn't see or something like
mm,
lost your sight. What would you? I mean, you would want to work. You would want to be productive.
mm,
But a lot of us will be thinking like, man, I wish I could see, and it's usually something very creative. It's usually like something beautiful, something that's, the art of life. It could be, the trees, the sky, So now all you have is, sound. So the art of music probably will hold more value
Mm.
to someone who can't see,
You know,
because that's the only art. That's the most powerful art you would have the full access of experience to. So yeah, man. So like art is important, when it comes down to it. If you're like in a moment where you're not as active, that's what gets you through, that reflection on art, reflection on work,
right?
taking it in. Thing.
I mean, that hits home in a completely similar but different way because my mentor, who I talked about earlier, the diabetes took his vision before he died, and this guy was always like a real, like a wise guy, just like always making jokes and just ran around like, he was 21 still. And I mean, he was a sound guy. That's how I met him. And he would roast the bands when he would sound check. I mean, it was the funniest thing I've ever seen, but he was so knowledgeable and skillful, but he was always afraid to really, progress more in his life. Like he had so many offers to go on tour as a sound guy, and he did it once and just he didn't believe in himself enough. But when the diabetes took his vision away, that's when he really woke up inside. And for someone that was always kind of making jokes and just being slapstick most of the time, like there was a few moments in I don't know, the short 10 years that I knew him, that he would pull me aside. And the last time he did that, a year before he died, he just like, you know what, I didn't really start taking life as serious as I should have until I lost my vision. And he's like, let me tell you something, Sulo. He's like, when you have people constantly telling you, you need to stop doing this, you need to stop doing that, you need to start listening to them. He's like, I don't want to see you make the same mistakes that I did, because now I'm on borrowed time. And if I'm lucky, I'll have 4 good years left in my life. And, there's a lot of things I wish I could have done that I'm not going to be able to do anymore, and now that I'm taking care of myself, it's just too late. He's all, I want you to carry that with you, and I want you to go out and live your life to its fullest, but don't be foolish like me. That was something that I'll never forget. And that's why this whole solo project, like when I'm writing, it's such an emotional record for me to write, because it's not just like, oh, I'm just doing this for fun and writing about this or that. It has more of a personal meaning to me and symbolism behind it. And I did a lot of that reflection, this weekend, So I feel you, man.
That's real. That's real.
I didn't mean to get all super deep, but
Oh, sorry.
you know,
It's
yeah,
real. It's real.
yeah,
Like,
it's real. It's real.
yeah, it takes, it takes that losing, sometimes you see like, man, you know, it's like if you haven't lost anyone as we're in our 40s. So that's when you start. That's when you start. I was in an acting class, and my instructor, there was a lot of younger people in the class, and she said, they're pretty as actors. Some are batshit crazy, and some are well off, and have lived great lives as young people, and they're younger. And she says, "Has anyone lost anyone in here in death?" And like no one's hand went up because they were all young. And me and her, of course, the same age. She turns to me, she says, "Don't worry, it's on the way." I mean, it was like a dark humor, and we look at each other, and and they laughed, but it is a reality, right? That eventually you begin to like lose people, and that will sober you, man. Like you're saying, that'll make you. He's a blessing that they even told you that, really, because a lot of times you don't even get to hear that from the person. You don't
He
get
was,
to
yeah.
at that moment, So yeah, that's real. Like then you go, oh, wait a minute, this thing. There is a such thing as it being too late. Because when you're younger, you don't think that. You think like, this thing is gonna just rock on like forever until you go, oh shit, like wait a minute, there is a such thing, you know,
It was hard
mental.
watching him deteriorate too, because I knew it was coming. Like I didn't think it would be that soon. I thought maybe he could, try to reverse some of these problems, health wise that he's having. But um, and working in this industry, within the first couple years, my mother once turned to me and she's like, been an ICU nurse for most of my life, but you are in such a toxic industry. I don't know how you do it watching all these people die around you, you know,
Mm,
in different fashions. And I've had to deal with like so many different situations, whether it's a band member, I'm working with, or, even when I have my studio, just like suicide, drugs, DUI accidents, getting hit by a DUI driver, getting shot and killed, suicide, you know, um, it's crazy. That's why I don't miss being in the music venue circuit full time anymore. And when I had my studio, it was a good ride. But when I closed it, I remember having this cathartic feeling that was also helped me get through like, the sense of loss. It was like someone died because everything kept flooding back. Like even one of the guys that helped paint the place, he died. A musician that only did one record is for the band he was in, he ended up dying of a drug overdose. My mentor had died 2 months before I opened up my studio, for example. Everything just came flooding back. And I remember, just being like upset, tearful, or cheerful, um, like so mixed emotionally. I don't know how to really put it into words, to be honest with you. I knew that I was just gonna have to, it's almost like I could sense like something bad was gonna happen because 6 months later we go into a pandemic. But
mm,
it was definitely life changing, man. And now I sit here doing all this reflection, and I'm just thankful that I'm okay. I'm thankful that I have a roof over my head, that I don't have any health problems yet, because life is short. You never know. And I'm gonna knock on wood right now, but I'm. It also keeps me motivated to do this. I started this because I was so moved by my friend who had a heart transplant at age 55. And he's like, I now have been given a second chance at life, and that'll wake you the fuck up and make you realize that life is short. And then, he's like, I could be dead right now, and God or whatever, force in the universe gave me this 22-year-old kid's heart. Uh, I need to, really just he changed everything. And that's what inspired me to do this show, to have different individuals, because everyone has a story to tell. You know,
yeah.
it's it's great to have like, especially someone I don't really even know on this show, and sharing
Yeah,
your story, you know what I mean?
beautiful. I appreciate you having
Yeah.
me. It was
Yeah. And I hope that others that listen to this podcast can find, some source of inspiration. And that um brings me to the next closing part of the show, is like I like to have every guest give like a final thought or reflection and share like something that's sentimental to them, like a motto, a life, or some words of wisdom, that they can kind of share to others. Like if someone wants to be a comic book artist or live out their dream, what kind of advice or motto or something like that would you want to really share with everybody?
Man, that's a great question, man. Oh man. Um, wow, that's a good one.
I
I
know it's like
think
an essay question and shit, but
I don't want to go too
yeah,
long. I mean, I want to keep it concise
right.
and clear. So I don't know. I think something like, comics are comics. I mean, but people make comics, people make movies. I mean, whatever you want to do, you I say go for it, because time is undefeated, right? Time is gonna win. Time doesn't care. It's not in your favor. It's not, you know, against you. It's just it is. So you can't play with it. It's undefeated. So go for it. Whatever it is. I wish someone had told me that like earlier. Whatever you want to do, go for it. And the second thing, like about advice, I wish someone had told me that any advice, always measure all advice. Measure all advice. Like don't be so quick to throw advice out of the window. Always measure and consider the advice, before you make the choice of whether to follow it or not. And I think the quote I heard, an example I heard, I forget, I think it was on someone else's podcast, where how you make like advice audits is you think of the person's intention, really their intention.
Mm.
And a lot of times we hear advice from someone and we go, well, they don't want me to be dot, 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 which isn't always true. It's just, it needs an advice. You need to audit the advice. So, your mother, if you went to your mother and you told her, I want to be a journalist right now covering the Gaza Strip. We probably need journalists covering the Gaza Strip right now because, there's propaganda on both sides, from Hamas to the Israeli government. And folks, Israeli folks, Palestinian people are suffering as a result. So you do need somebody to get that information, but it's very dangerous. So what is your mother going to say? She's going to say, yeah, you should go do it. She's probably going to say no. And it doesn't mean she doesn't want you to live your dream. It doesn't mean she doesn't want you to be happy. Her number one concern is your safety. So you have to audit that advice. You can't just go, that person doesn't want me to be successful, or she don't believe in me. Like that's her number one thing is that you don't die.
Right.
That should
Yeah.
be that should be a cool journalist.
My
So
mother would shut me down real quick.
yeah, and we need those people to do that. That's the thing we need people to do. So it's it's a very important job now. It's essential.
Yeah.
But that's my concern. So just any advice you get, sort of auditing that advice and seeking out the advice for whatever it is you need. And a lot of times we take advice personally. We don't audit it. We don't see who it's coming from or why they're even giving that advice. So that to me, I wish someone had told me that like when I was like 18.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes the best advice you get is from a random stranger. Someone you don't even,
Time. Yeah.
everybody interprets things different. We all think differently. We may have similar viewpoints in life, but we're all wired differently. I have the ethos that we can always, learn something new from each other. I like to work in the team environment. I like having multiple brains in a room and seeing what we can come up with and create
Yeah.
and make happen. So that's what I love about how when I was first asking you, I was like, well, how would I really describe, dark publishing? And you're like, imagine it as a collective.
Right now. Yeah.
And that hit home for me because that's what I did when I created my studio. I took somebody's idea, turned that key when I bought the business, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do things a little differently and a little unorthodox than what most studios do. And I did, and I had a successful run doing it. So,
Yeah.
anyways, any final thoughts, any final words for anyone out there before we say
That's
goodbye?
Talon Kickstarter live until May 15th. Um, Kickstarter does have a new feature where we can extend the campaign a little longer. So we're considering that, but for now, we'll say May 15th is the last day. Our Kickstarter comics are limited edition, so I won't make any more after this. So if you have, you know, a Talent Kickstarter edition comic, that's kind of it. The next iteration of that issue would be through a publisher, more than
Okay.
likely. So
And we'll share all the social media website links that you want on your episode profile. But how can people find you?
Oh, right now, Instagram, um, Geoff.Vincent. Instagram, that's where I'm at. Geoff.Vincent. Or you can go to Talon. That's not me, but I want to promote Talon.
Right.
Talon_SOD. And also Dark Publishing, all one word, Instagram at Dark Publishing. So yeah. all
Okay.
that-
Yeah, and all the links will be on the profile, both on YouTube and all the streaming platforms. Geoffrey, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. I mean, this is what I love about having a free format show. In all kind of different, like, directions, from comic books and what you're doing to video games to just, culture, current affairs, life, you know what I mean? But that's what I love about it, just picking someone's mind and getting to know them better. And I feel after everything, and then, almost 2 hours we've been talking, that I've gotten to know you a little better. And, man, like, I hope we can definitely keep in touch. And, I look forward to putting out this episode and, seeing what the future brings for you, man. You know?
Yeah, same with you, man. I can't wait to hear the record. I'll be coming to San Diego soon. I'll let you know when.
Yeah, please do, man. I'll take you out. We'll go, have a good time, man. I'll show you like the San Diego life.
Sure, man. It was great being on here.
Awesome.
Thank you.
On that note, that wraps up another episode of the King's Couch. I'm your host, Sulo King. This is Geoffrey Vincent, and we are going to say farewell.
Farewell. Thank you. Thank you.
You got it. We'll see you next time, guys.
The King of Kings. There is only one.